Welcome to Mind Shield. We protect the mind and pursue the truth. Let's get started.
So, when you're investigating claims that are, let's be honest, way out on the fringe of what most people believe is possible, we're talking about hidden tech and unseen influence, your rules, they aren't just suggestions. No way. They're your armor. Today, we're going to break down the ethical framework that you absolutely have to navigate this stuff. Because in this world, credibility, it isn't just a nice to have, it's the whole product.
Let's just get one thing straight right from the jump. The stakes here, they couldn't be higher. This is not about chasing clicks or being sensational. We're talking about people who are in real distress. And if we get sloppy, if our reporting is careless, we can make things so much worse. We can deepen their isolation, we can feed their paranoia, and cause genuine, real-world psychological harm. So the number one rule, always, is to do no harm. Okay, so to even begin to investigate this stuff responsibly, we need a language that's precise and, well, neutral. We're going to use the term covert neurosensory intrusion, or CNSI for short. Now, this isn't us saying, this is what's happening. Think of it more like a category, a bucket. It lets us look at the evidence for claims like voice-to-skull or electronic harassment without getting stuck on labels that are already loaded with meaning. It just keeps us focused on one thing, the evidence for the reported effects.
All right, here's the roadmap for today. First, we'll talk about the unseen battlefield. Then, we'll dive into the tech dossier. After that, we'll open up the precedent file, look at the human cost, lay down the rules of evidence, and finally, chart the path to credibility. Let's get into it. Okay, Section 1, the unseen battlefield. We're stepping into a space where the lines between science, speculation, and personal experience get really blurry. And the battlefield we're talking about? It's the human mind.
So how do you even talk about this stuff? Well, there's a concept called the Overton window. Think of it as the range of ideas that society is willing to even talk about seriously. Our job here isn't to grab this topic and force it into that window. Nope. Our goal is just to present the documented facts calmly and responsibly. And if we do that right, maybe the window shifts on its own, and we can start having a real conversation that's based on evidence, not on fear.
All right, on to Section 2, the technology dossier. This is where we get into the nuts and bolts and really try to separate what's science fact from what's just science fiction. Okay, this is a big one. At the heart of a lot of these claims is a real documented scientific phenomenon, the microwave auditory effect, or the Frey effect. And let me be clear, this is not a theory. It's a proven thing. It's the ability of pulsed microwaves to make someone hear sounds inside their head without anything actually entering their ear. The science behind it? It's called thermal elastic expansion. Basically, each microwave pulse causes a tiny, super fast heating of the tissue in your head. That creates a little pressure wave that your inner ear picks up as sound. Wild, right? And look, this isn't some brand new discovery. This has been around for decades. The timeline here tells the story. It starts back in 1961 with Alan Frey's first big paper. He even found that something as simple as a piece of wire mesh on the side of the head could block the sound. Then, jump to 1974, you've got researchers successfully sending actual spoken words with this tech. And then by 2003, it's not just a lab curiosity. The US Navy is funding a project called Medusa to turn it into a weapon for crowd control. So yeah, there's a long paper trail here.
And it's not just about hearing things either. We know for a fact that electromagnetic energy can affect the body in other ways. You've got the thermoelastic expansion we just talked about. But Frey also documented that different pulses could make people feel pins and needles or a sense of pressure. Then there's the military's active denial system, which is basically a heat ray that makes your skin feel like it's on fire. Totally non-lethal, but very effective for crowd control. And in medicine, doctors use transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, to literally use magnetic fields to make brain cells fire. The big takeaway here is simple. The idea that energy fields can create physical sensations in the body, that's not sci-fi. It's just science. So that brings us to Section 3, the precedent file. Look, knowing the science is one piece of the puzzle, but the history is what gives it all context. And believe me, there's a very good reason why you can't just dismiss claims of covert government programs out of hand.
Just read that for a second. This isn't from a movie script. It's a direct quote from a real, declassified CIA memo from 1952 for a project called Artichoke. This isn't some conspiracy theory. It's their own words. It's a statement of intent. They were literally asking the question, how can we get total control of a person's mind?
The desire, the will to develop these kinds of technologies has been there for more than 70 years.
And it wasn't just talk. That intent absolutely led to action. Everyone's heard of MKUltra, right? The CIA's horrifying program using drugs and psychological abuse on people who had no idea they were test subjects. But then there's the Moscow signal, where the US Embassy in Moscow was secretly microwaved by the Soviets for decades. And get this, buried deep in the MKUltra files, thanks to Freedom of Information Act requests, we found something called Subproject 119. Its specific goal? To research remote electronic brain effects. So when you look at the history, there's a clear, undeniable pattern of secret research in this exact area.
And don't for a second think this is all just ancient Cold War history. The concepts have just evolved. This image here, it's from a 2022 NATO report on something they call cognitive warfare. And guess what it says? It explicitly defines the human mind as a modern battlefield. So the same ideas that were being secretly researched decades ago are now officially part of modern military thinking. All right, Section 4, the human cost. With all that science and history as a backdrop, we have to talk about the impact this has on people today, because all of that context creates what can only be called a devastating credibility gap. This right here is where the human cost becomes crystal clear. On the left, you have the symptoms of what's been called Havana syndrome, reported by U.S. diplomats. These reports are taken very, very seriously. On the right, you have symptoms reported by regular civilians, people who often call themselves targeted individuals. Just look at the two lists. The overlap is, well, it's pretty much identical.
So that leads us to the central and, frankly, painful question. How is it that one group of people, diplomats, reports these symptoms, and our top scientific bodies say directed microwave energy is the most likely cause, but when a private citizen reports the exact same list of experiences, they're often just dismissed and told it's a psychiatric issue? Why? Why the enormous difference in who gets believed?
And this credibility gap is it's incredibly destructive. It creates this vicious cycle, a trap really. You have someone who is experiencing something deeply disturbing. They don't trust the systems that are supposed to help them, doctors, police, because they're terrified of being labeled crazy. And then those systems, which don't really have a box to put these experiences in, often do exactly that. They pathologize it. And all that does is prove the person's fears right and pushes them further into isolation. Section 5, the rules of evidence. So how do we break that destructive cycle? We do it with a strict, disciplined, and ethical set of rules. A framework that throws out guesswork and replaces it with a clear, repeatable process. These are the non-negotiables, the hard and fast rules. Rule 1. You never, ever name a suspect without verifiable proof. Period. Accusations can destroy lives, so the burden of proof has to be absolute. Rule 2. We don't publish how-to guides for hurting people. Our job is to inform, not to arm. Rule 3, and this one is so important, you have to be obsessive about separating documented facts from reported claims and your own hypotheses. We'll dig into that in a second. And finally, if you get something wrong, you own it. You issue a public correction right away. Your integrity is the only currency you have. And this is really the core of the whole discipline. Every single piece of information gets one of 3 labels. That's it. Documented means it's a hard fact. We can point to a scientific paper, a declassified document, a patent. It's verifiable. Reported means it's something someone told us. We can say, so-and-so claims this, but we never present it as a fact. And hypothesis, well, that's our best guess at connecting the dots, but we make it super clear that it's just a theory that needs more evidence. This simple practice is what separates a real investigation from just spiraling into speculation. Okay, last section, number 6, the path to credibility. This is where we make it practical. This is about taking everything we've talked about and using it to empower people, to help them turn a confusing, personal story into a solid, objective dossier that people have to take seriously.
So the big question is, how do you document something that feels like it's designed to leave no trace? The answer is disciplined evidence collection. It's a 5-step process. First, you log everything. Date, time, location, a detailed description of what you experienced. Second, you capture it. Take photos, videos, audio recordings, screenshots, anything objective you can get. Third, preserve it. You make copies to work with, but you keep the original files untouched to maintain a chain of custody. Fourth, and this is huge, you validate it. You find a third party, an expert, an RF engineer, a cybersecurity specialist, a doctor, who can look at your evidence and verify it. And only then, once you've done all that homework, do you go to step 5. You escalate it through official channels, like filing a police report or talking to a lawyer. That is how a story becomes a case. And underneath this whole disciplined, evidence-based approach, there's a simple human principle. You prepare your case, you have your answers ready, but when you present it, you do it with gentleness and respect. Anger and panic just make people shut down. A calm, respectful presentation of the facts. That's how you build credibility. That's how a difficult truth can actually start to travel.
Building a case file is one thing, right? That's a process. But what about the human side of it? What do you do when a friend or a family member comes to you and they believe this is happening to them? That's the really tough question we're going to tackle next time. How do you support someone who is suffering without just feeding their fear, but also without dismissing what they believe is their reality? It's a fine line to walk, and we're going to explore it.